Welcome to Not Just Ads, the show where B2B brands discover how creator-led content drives pipeline, builds trust, and grows long-term brand equity. Each episode, we speak with business leaders, founders, and creators who are defining their categories. I'm your host, Marcus Sherwin, and this is the creator economy for B2B. Hello and welcome today to Not Just Ads, the creator economy for B2B. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by David Rajakovich. David, thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
Yes, thank you, Marcus. It's great to be here.
David, I'm really excited to talk with you because you have a lot of experience running different companies. I know that currently you're in the cybersecurity space, and prior to this, you'd led a successful edtech company as well.
Sure. Yeah, I'd like to say that my life is a series of random events because I have been involved in many different sectors. In terms of B2B tech experience, so started with an edtech business that's now called Skill Dynamics. We were just a handful of people when I joined, a couple 100,000 in revenue, huddled in a very small, nondescript office in Hasselt, Belgium, of all places. And I had two Belgian business partners. And basically, it seems like another world because, for instance, we had very little financial understanding or knowledge. It just so happened that we were onto an idea and executed well, that it was profitable and cash generative really from very early on. And that is in contrast with a lot of software businesses where it's not so easy to be profitable and cash generative from such an early stage. So I think that is an early difference. But yeah, we grew Skill Dynamics through two private equity exits. So I've got experience working with two different private equity sponsors. Again, quite different experiences with both, but equally valuable. That's a great question. So I was working with a competitor of theirs in the I would say, fairly early days of e-learning for procurement and supply chain professionals, and decided to go out on my own, and then met up with my two eventual business partners. And we met in St. Pancras. They went through the Channel Tunnel, and I'll still remember that meeting very well, where we just decided to work together and embark on a very entrepreneurial project. And yeah, working remotely, going back and forth between Belgium and the UK every month or two. And yeah, we were remote before it was cool to.
Yeah. Exciting times. Roughly what year was this?
That was 2013 is when I first joined them.
Right.
So yeah, spent quite a bit of time doing that.
An exciting journey. So from the edtech company then, how, when you decided to get involved then, or kind of have the collaboration, should we say, with private equity, did that come about organically, or was it something that you kind of thought from when you saw that it got traction, that you thought, okay, we could really kind of make this even grow more if we had some backers like that? Or how did the kind of thought process come about?
Yeah, exactly. I was a relative newbie back then in terms of the world of even venture capital or private equity. And I've come a long way since then. We were fortunate to have one of our founders out of the three of us who had experience going through the process of selling a business to whether it's a trade buyer or a private equity buyer. And he guided us to go find a broker that was able to present us in the best light. And yes, that was the idea. Is we're growing well now, just the three of us, bootstrapped, and now we needed a strategic sparring partner to really push us to the next level and inject some capital. Although we didn't even necessarily need the money. It was more about the expertise and how to become more financially sophisticated and move finance to the center of the business. And that really was the driver between that for that first private equity exit. And the second one, we were moving more toward becoming a UK-based company rather than a Belgian-based company. My two business partners were older, farther along in the journey, and were looking to reduce their roles. And since I was in the UK, it made more sense that we find a UK private equity sponsor that could take us even to the next level. Yeah, so it was 2013 when I first joined the company, and 2017 was our first PE exit. And that was a very new process. We had to create what was called an information memorandum without having necessarily we didn't have a CFO, we didn't have very sophisticated financial information, but putting together a huge document with strong financial information being audited for the first time, that was all quite new to us. And then by the second time, we were ready to go. And the second time was even more intense. There were lots of road shows. We were doing calls at all hours of the day, flying off to Chicago to meet US investors just to drum up as much possible interest in our company. And there was quite a bit of interest because we had, like I said, we were growing rapidly, growing around 20% a year. We're cash generative from very early on. So we were quite an attractive business, I would say. But
Yeah.
yeah, quite an experience.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. Just for the listeners then, in terms of the size of the business, like headcount wise, at this point, how many employees did you have, and like kind of markets and so on that you would have been active in?
Yeah, so during the first PE exit, I think we were probably around 40 to 50 employees, and then by the peak of our time together, we were around 70 employees. So we were
Right, so you nearly doubled to headcount.
Yeah, fairly significant. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, I think, because I guess from the public, you usually hear about like kind of when the deals are done and stuff. But I think there's a huge amount of work and effort and lots of moving plates that go into it, I imagine, to get to that point. From the first one to the second one, do you think there's any kind of key, what would I say, like learnings, or also key things that you're like, okay, these are the really fundamentals to get it right and get it over the line?
Yeah, I think the big difference became in how professional the business was. So early on, we had some entrepreneurial adventures where we went into, so we were a procurement and supply chain training company. We had some failures along the way, various attempts at designing apps and creating the sales academy, which didn't take off. But we also learned a lot in terms of working with our clients to co-design a lot of our offerings. So we worked with Siemens and Roche very early on, and what now would seem quite an easy thing to do was not difficult back then. So we had a data analytics platform, for example, and then we also had a skill gap assessment, which matched up, so delivered personalized learning plans. So that was quite a lesson, is don't just build cool stuff, but actually build it together with your clients. And that's something that we're actively taking into my new role at Acuity Risk Management. So we're in the process now, and by the time you're listening to this, we'll be further along, very likely, but we are working very closely with potential clients to make sure that what we're building exactly hits the spot.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting, I think, because I guess a lot of things are around timing as well. Like if you're building something and it's taken a while to go to market, and then there's a misalignment in terms of what the customer needs, it can be frustrating. But yeah, maybe you could share with the audience a little bit about where you are now, Acute Risk Management, and briefly before that, maybe if you could just share a little bit about the transition from the exit from when you did the second deal with PE company, and then until you exited that company until to where you are at the moment.
Yeah. So now at Acuity Risk Management, I'm CEO there for the past year, almost exactly as we're recording this. And it's a different ride. So we are earlier in our journey than when I had left Skill Dynamics. We are also publicly traded. So we're on the AIM stock exchange. And before, I had worked under private equity sponsors. So under private equity, there's a great deal of involvement generally from people on the board. You need to be very clear in your communication, very much facts and data based. It's a similar element here. It's just that with the publicly traded element, there's more compliance requirements that you need to do. So there's some cost involved in that. There's also, so you need to announce anything that is publicly, that should be publicly available for investors to learn whether they should be investing or not. Whereas PE is very much a closed shop, and we you're not to disclose any information pretty much under any circumstances. The board element is pretty similar. There's some here, there's non-executive directors, PE, they're called general partners but essentially they're performing a very similar oversight and governance role. They're questioning you. They're making sure that you're staying on top of your game. I think in both cases, speed and the difference between, say, a bootstrap company and one with a board is with a board, there's this accountability that's constantly happening, which is good to keep you sharp and make sure that every day you wake up in the morning, you're thinking, what can we do to better serve our clients to add more value? Whereas in a lot of bootstrap companies that I've seen, you can tend to fall into a bit of a drift and relax a bit more. If you're generating cash, you're making a profit. Yeah.
So you'd say that the accountability maybe of the board, it's like in one hand it's nearly a motivating factor in a sense of like you've somebody to answer to, you have these targets or you have these expansion plans, you have to deliver on something. Whereas if it's bootstrapping, it's like, okay, if you hit that wave and it's like, right, there's money coming in and you can pay your bills and you don't have as much accountability. But as a consequence of that, the real true potential, maybe you may hit a ceiling very, very soon.
Yeah, I think that's possible. I mean, my nature is very competitive and always driving forward anyway, but there are business owners that are happy just, getting by each month or each year and gives them a decent living and they're happy with that, which is fine.
Yeah.
That's not the world I live in. And it's probably not the world. Well, it's definitely not the world that I would want to live in either.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe you could just share a little bit about then where you are at the moment because it's quite a competitive space, I imagine, in cybersecurity and Acuity Risk Management. In terms of the categories that you operate specifically in the cybersecurity space, maybe you could just share a little bit about the business, the category that you're in, the clients that you serve, and so on, just so the audience have a better understanding.
Sure. Yeah. We're in what's a category called cyber GRC, which is governance, risk, and compliance. And the main thing we're trying to do is to measure and of course, lower the risk that any organization faces. And that comes from many different elements. So it can be internal risk. And a lot of people think of IT and IT architecture as representing, and that is an important part of cyber risk, but there's also the human element involved. The other aspect to cyber risk that people are waking up to is this third party risk management. So if you think of Marks and Spencer and Jaguar Land Rover and the Co-op, there's been a number of high profile successful cyber attacks that have come through suppliers to those organizations. And what we're working on right now is, and currently the way third-party risk management is quite disjointed and it doesn't work very well. And the reason for that is that we're still sending out supplier questionnaires. We're sending them on spreadsheets. So they're scattered all over the place. They're not connected to actual outcomes. So what we're doing is working on building the future of third-party risk management, which can use questionnaires, but it's focused on critical suppliers, crucially, and it's focused on the ones that have access, for instance, to your critical data. So which ones have that access, and where do you need to invest in order to lower that risk? And we're going to so it won't just be about questionnaires. It'll be about understanding external signals that allow you to continuously monitor that cyber risk of your critical suppliers. So we are very much deep in the weeds of building that now by talking to our clients, by talking to prospects, and really stress testing our idea before we go out and build something that the market may or may not want.
Sure. So in that sense, you're building with the client in terms of, because I guess everyone's architecture, there's some nuance to that in terms of how they're set up, what suppliers they work with, what markets they serve, etc. So what you do is you get an understanding in terms of the knowledge base that you have, where those potential risks are, and then build an infrastructure around it where they then can in future then analyze and see, okay, which could be less or more of a threat to the business.
Yeah, exactly. So the big problem, just give you a little sneak preview of what's to come. You've heard it here first on the Marcus Sherwin's podcast. So consider yourself privileged. But yes, we will be combining many different systems, because right now you have an identity access management system, you have an incident management system, you have vulnerability scans, but they're all very noisy. They're full of alerts. They're not prioritized, and you don't know where you need to focus your investment and efforts today. And that's what we will change. So we'll take all those different signals and we'll make sure that you have a prioritized list of actions in addition to where you stand today. So many chief information security officers or CISOs, they can't adequately express to the board how exposed are we, because they just have this huge amount of alerts that are called critical, but from an IT perspective versus from a business or financial perspective. So we will take those signals and we will make it into a defensible narrative for them to take to the board, and also allow them to manage and focus on what actions and what investments will make the biggest difference today and in the next 30 days, in the next 60 days, et cetera.
Yeah, because I imagine with these kind of things of breaches, it's like, it's not a priority until it's happened. But obviously people see now that it does happen, and it happens more regularly than people would think. And you hear about it on the news all the time and everything. So like, from your perspective then, I guess this is a topic that comes up on probably most board meetings, especially if it's a public company or something. If you mitigate the risk, like, I mean, if somebody says something wrong in the press or something, that's bad. But if people's data is breached, that, I mean, is probably 10 times worse from an element of trust and everything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Marks and Spencer's had a devastating effect on their share price. They were down 20, 30% at one point. So this is becoming front and center for boards. Boards are becoming really personally responsible for this. In some cases, there can be massive fines, and of course, just can generally shut down. Yeah. If I use the example, so in a supply chain context, if a supplier is integrated via API or whatever into your supply chain control tower, they have an access point into critical data that can disrupt your operations. Whether it can be, you can be shut down, you can't confirm client orders because you don't know what components are coming in, for instance, then that's just one example. There's many examples. So yeah, this is becoming front and center for boards. And if you try to talk to the boards about, a critical vulnerability, but there's no business context around it, then you're missing a trick. But if you're talking about, for instance, by what we call business service, or by, let's say, you have a customer portal and you have lots of customer information on there, that would be a business service. And if you classify all the different risks according to business service, you can then look at where our biggest risks are. Are they with a supplier that has a link into our data, or are they some sort of internal risk? But you don't know that until you have a prioritized picture, and that's what we're working on.
So your goal really, and the service and the solution that you provide is to bridge that gap between how a board would interpret the risk versus then how, say, someone from the technical team, the security team, would be able to synthesize that in terms of a priority of like high risk, whether something is medium or maybe not as much of a threat.
Yeah, so it's answering the question of how exposed are we, and we can say this is our rating right now across all these different categories. And basically, here are the steps that we need to take in the next month to improve our rating, and dividing that by business service. So if it's a billing and payment system, it's a customer portal, if it's e-commerce site, basically showing this e-commerce site has a 2 out of 5 rating. And to achieve a 3, we need to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really interesting. David, if anyone wants to find out more about Acuity Risk Management and what you're doing, I know that you're working on a number of different projects as well. Where are you most active? Where can people find out more?
Yeah, LinkedIn is where we're most active. You can find me on Reddit.
I,
Yeah,
what I'll do is I'll put your link in the show notes. I'll get it off you afterwards, and we can put it down in the show notes as well from your handle on Reddit. I have your LinkedIn here, and I'll include that as well.
yeah, and we're acuityrm.com is our website, so that's a good place to learn more about us. And yes, very much open to hearing from any of your guests. Reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, and I will most certainly get back to you.
Great. David, thank you very much for joining us today. It was great to talk with you. I learned a lot, and thanks again for joining us on the show.
Great. Thank you very much, Marcus. My pleasure.
Thanks.